A guy I met on Tinder went from charming and kind to a psychotic creep begging me to let him sleep over. I matched with a really cute guy named Pete, and he started the convo off in an explicit way. He was really cute, and so I overlooked the explicit comments he made. He had just moved to my city and just like me, he wasn't looking for anything serious, he just wanted to meet some people and see some local spots. The first night we met up at a well-known tapas bar. I chose this place because I had a few friends that were waitresses and bar staff there, so I felt safe meeting a stranger here. He was on time, we had nice chats, really cool guy on first impression. We spoke about work, to which he responded that he's a software developer but he's just started his freelancing career. We spoke about where he stays now that he's moved up here, and he said that he's sharing a place with some friends. Rent is quite pricey in the city, so it made sense to me. He asked where I live, and I told him that I'm lucky to have my own one-bedroom apartment in quite a nice and popular part of town, mostly thanks to my parents that helped me save and gave me a portion of the deposit money for my 21st birthday which I invested and grew until I had enough to put down a decent deposit. He then offered to drop me off at home, but I said no, I'd prefer to Uber home by myself. He asked if this was because I'm gonna go meet someone else after him, and I laughed because I genuinely thought this was a joke. The next time I saw Pete was about 3 days later. He said he knew it was fast but he actually couldn't stop thinking about me and he wanted to see me again. This time we met at a different restaurant, also one I chose because I went to school with the owner and knew all the staff pretty well. The place is a little bit more pricey, and he got super annoyed with me for ordering as much as I did. I couldn't understand why, since I insisted on paying for my own stuff both times we met. That night, same story, let me drop you off at home please. Again, I said no. While we're in the middle of this conversation he gets a call. He stepped away but I could still hear a fair amount. No, I think I'm gonna stay with you again. Yeah, I'm with her. Don't worry about it. Okay, I'll be home soon. So now I think he's chatting to his roommate or maybe his mom, but I don't ask. He comes back to our table. Please, I insist. Bad things happen to women that Uber home this late by themselves. I'd feel better if I dropped you off. Not having the energy to argue, I tell him fine, and I put my address into his GPS. As soon as he got home he messages me and tells me he'll be picking me up in the morning to go for a picnic. I reply that I actually have cleaning to do, but again, he insists that he'll see me at 10. Come 10 a.m. that next morning, best believe he's right outside of my apartment. I get into his car, and as he leans over to kiss my cheek I notice that his breath stinks. Obviously I'm a little grossed out. We have our picnic and it's quite nice. He tried to kiss me a few times but I avoided it with everything in me as his breath reeked. By about 4 p.m. I tell him that I really want to go home, and the park we went to is about an hour-and-a-half drive from my apartment so I couldn't really Uber back home because it would cost a fortune. He agrees it's time to go, so we get in his car and we're off. I fell asleep in the car on the drive back, and when I woke up he asked if we should finish the rest of the wine he had brought at my apartment. I said to him I don't want to, and he just snaps. He raised his voice, and said something along the lines of, "What are you hiding from me? Just be honest. Why are you so desperate to keep me out of your apartment?" I was so confused I actually just kept quiet. He dropped me off, but I could see his car across from my apartment for about half an hour before he actually left. About 5 minutes after he left he let me know that he's home safe and he thinks he's starting to fall for me. So naturally I'm freaked out, because I made it clear that I didn't want anything serious and he said he felt the same. I said to him if that's the case I think we should take a break from hanging out with each other. About 5 days later he messages and asks if we can go for dinner again. He found an Indian cuisine place he knows I'll love. Despite my better judgment, I tell him okay. He tells me that he'll pick me up. So 7 p.m. comes, he tells me he's downstairs, and as I go down to meet him I see he's standing at my gate. I press the remote control to open the gate, and he walked inside to meet me. Show me which one is yours. I'd love to see how you live. Not hi. Not how are you. That's his opening line. So now I'm naturally unsettled. I say to him that I'm starving, could we go for dinner and I'll show him my place at a later stage. At dinner he gets a call again. This time he didn't step away. Pete, yeah. I don't know. I can let you know by about 10. He then turns to me, am I sleeping by you tonight? Me, no. I don't know. I have work tomorrow. Pete to me, yes me too. Then back to the caller, I'll let you know okay. Caller, no you're not. Can you just get your things please? Pete, and do what with them? Caller, take them to that girl you're seeing. I'm done asking you. Now I'm sitting here in absolute shock and terror. What in the F is going on here? Our food arrives, and we barely speak. I say to him, why did you ask me if you can sleep over by me? We're not spending time together like that. You know this. He then spins this story about how he just wants to hang out and again see how I live. I then say to him, very frankly, that I don't like having strangers in my apartment. He gets very touched, and the bill arrives. As per usual, I pay for myself, he pays for himself. I say to him I'll get an Uber home, and he says what's the use? I already know where you live. Let me drop you off. By now I've already decided that this will be the last time I see him. I get into his car, and I reach for my jumper that I threw in the back when he got me. I notice a bag in the back of the car, full of clothes and toiletries, as well as a pillow. I don't think much of it. On the way home he's dead quiet, when suddenly he says, "Do you know how selfish you are? I've had no issue driving you around, but you don't want me to sleep over by you." I say to him that I've never had an issue with Ubering, and if he's so touched I also have no issue with paying him what the Ubers would have cost me. I'm over this and I'm not even playing nice anymore. His phone rings again. "Caller, your stuff is at the security boom at the gate, Pete. Stay with your girlfriend or stay with your mom. You're effed for taking advantage of everyone like this." "Pete, I don't speak to my mom, you know this, you beach," and then hangs up. Now I think this is maybe an ex-girlfriend that he needs to collect things from. Before I've even had a chance to process what happened he turns to me and starts yelling at me. I have nowhere to go. "Are you effing happy? You spoiled brat. Living off mommy and daddy's money. Getting driven around by me like I effing work for you, beach." My whole body got stiff with fear. I don't know if I'm going to cry or throw up. In my head I'm just planning how I'm going to grab my bag the second he stops, and run straight to the cafe under my apartment. If you run through the cafe you can get to a gate that takes you to the back part of my apartment, and it works with fingerprint access. There wasn't time to still find my keys in my bag and I didn't want the main gate I normally use to open wide enough for him to get in when I go in. He stops at my apartment and as planned, I jump out, run into the cafe, run out the back, through the little gate, up to the second floor and I hammered on a neighbor's door. I went inside and told her and her husband everything that happened and asked if they would mind calling the cafe to explain why I ran through with no explanation and in such a state. I blocked Pete and I haven't seen him since. I'm still not sure what his case was. From what I gathered, he was basically homeless and I think he wanted to get into my apartment to maybe sleep over there for a while. I'm not sure if the girl that kept calling him was also a Tinder date that let her into his apartment and he just never left. All I know is that he scared the living daylights out of me and I never ever want to see him again. I got into an argument with my golden child sister. My mother proceeded to berate me and compare me to my brother, who is in jail for rope. My sister is the golden child and a miracle baby. Due to this, she has never worked a day in her life and our parents heavily favored her. This woman unalived my baby cat, and my parents blamed me for leaving the cat around my sister. 2 weeks ago my sister and I got into a verbal disagreement about money that was owed. We are both college students. My sister has never worked and refuses to get a driver's license, so I've had to front a lot of expenses for her over the 2 years we've been going to the same school. Over the years I've realized a lot of manipulation went into this. For instance, about a year ago, I was fronting basically every grocery expense for her because we were in a financial crisis. I believed she was broke and I wasn't willing to let her starve. Turns out she actually had thousands of dollars stashed away. She spent it all on an impulse purchase that was stolen exactly 3 days later. 2 years of getting screwed on money has taught me to set firm boundaries with her. Our parents are extreme enablers of her behavior and often use guilt tactics to get me to keep paying. After consulting with my friends, I realized I was enabling this by not forcing her to pay for herself. Last semester I set up an agreement system where it was agreed that if she split the cost of gas with me and did my half of the dishes, I would take her to class all week. This included Fridays when she had class and I didn't. I told my sister that in exchange for the dinner I bought her, she could either pay me back or do a few dishes. This made her really angry and she said she'd only do it if I also took her to school on Thursday. My sister signed up for all virtual classes this semester except one, so she didn't need rides, except to her Tuesday and Thursday class. Her class was on an entirely different campus than the main one. It would have been completely out of my way and I refused to do it. Since she didn't want to do the dishes I told her to pay me back. The argument escalated and we were both yelling things at each other. I told her to get a job and stop stealing from me because life isn't free. She balled her fist, put it in my face and said I deserved to get punched. It turned into a physical conflict at that point. We both got pretty bruised. My sister immediately called our mother and told her she was assaulted. My mom called me and decided to compare me to her brother, who is a severely abusive person who committed serious crimes like roping his ex, as well as doing the same to kids. To say that cut deep was an understatement. I've always been raised to be extra nice to my sister because my mom was an abused younger sibling, but this time they've both gone too far. My mom's stance changed quite a bit when she heard my side and not my sister's one-sided cry bullying, but I can't get over what she said. I've long suspected she's taken her anger at her brother out on me over the years and this confirmed it. I've decided to cut my sister out of my life. I really don't want to have to cut my mom out too, especially since our relationship used to be strong, but I can't let them think it's okay to treat me like this. I walked in on my husband laying hands on our son. Plus update. I walked in on my husband laying hands on our son. I married my husband 20 years ago. We had twin boys as soon as we got married who are now 19. Today, I came home from a shopping spree and dropped one of the twins at the airport. When I walked in, I heard my husband yelling and cursing. I went upstairs to where the sound was coming from. I walked into his office and there I saw him, wailing on our other twin while he was on the ground, kicking and stomping. I begged him to stop and eventually he did. I rushed to comfort our son and my husband aggressively grabbed my arm and demanded I don't help our son. I stressed that he was hurt and he was our son. My husband retaliated, "He's not our son, he's a pathetic man that needs to get the F out of my house by the morning." He kicked him again and walked away, dragging me with him and not minding my resilience. We got to our room, he locked the door and went to the bathroom to shower. I brought my husband some new clothes and went back to sit on the bed. After some time, the water turned off and then I went to see if he had calmed down. I found him sitting on the floor crying. He cried all night while holding me and only just fell asleep less than an hour ago. My husband is the personification of a gentle giant. He's 6'10", over 300 pounds, buff and used to box. But this man would never hurt anything. I mean, if I asked him to take care of a bug for me, he would slowly pick it up while talking to it and then take it outside. He has never had a loud voice or shown any aggression. So I have never seen him that way before. I'm stuck here under him and don't know if our son is okay downstairs. I want to secretly undermine my husband and go check in on our son, but I can't move right now. I don't even know if our son is alive right now. I know he hasn't eaten since I had brought groceries to make dinner and didn't get to. And frankly, I'm a bit shaken up right now. I feel a bit intimidated by my husband. I have always had an irrational fear of domestic violence from a man since my dad did it to my mom. One thing that drew me to him was how gentle he was. Our son is 6'5" and almost 300 pounds and does football himself. After seeing the damage he did to our son, I'm very frightened to think of what he could do to me. Update: I was able to get some details on the cause of the fight. It was a big eye-opening moment. I texted my son asking him and he finally called back. He wouldn't tell me what happened either, he just told me he was fine and kept apologizing to me and I didn't know why. After my husband woke up, he went outside. He didn't take his phone, wallet, keys or even shoes. While he was gone I went to go see my son. He locked himself in the room and kept apologizing to me. I had picked up food on my way and forced him to open the door so I could feed him since I knew he hadn't eaten. He opened the door. I tried to ask my son what happened but he refused to tell me. A few hours later my husband came home and I confronted him. I stood my ground and demanded he tell me. I told him how I felt about the whole situation and how upset I was with him, and threatened to call the cops and even divorce. He fell down and cried again. I comforted him for some time and then he went upstairs and came back down with his suitcase packed. He didn't say anything to me, and took my arm and brought me to his office. He made me sit on his chair, readying me to look at something on the screen. He started crying and apologized profusely. On his desk my son's iPad was there. He opened the computer and there was a flood of pictures and videos of me in very inappropriate situations. Pictures and videos of me unclothed, getting out of the shower, etc. And these were things from my son's tablet. There were pictures of me getting dressed, picking up things, in intimate positions with my husband when we obviously thought they couldn't see. And even from our bedroom, there were pictures. There were even some where he touched me while I was sleeping. There was just so much. I'm a very curvy woman, but I have never expected this behavior from my son. Especially because at their schools their classmates talk about my body and he is always defensive and protective of me. I don't have a habit of dressing immodestly around the house when the kids are home, but there have been instances where I'll wear some leggings or a really fitted top or dress. My husband told me he'd be staying at his friend's house to give me space. He left and left me sitting there looking at myself in weird pictures that my son captured. I don't know what he does with these photos. I feel so vulnerable and dirty right now. I don't know how to feel right now or even think. I'm disappointed by the engagement ring my fiancé bought for me plus update. I am feeling a little down after my boyfriend's recent proposal. I said yes, but I am a bit disappointed in the ring. Even when we first started talking about marriage, I told him that I absolutely 100% wanted to be involved in picking out or designing the engagement ring. And, since we both have good jobs, I would even put some of my own money down to get a ring I absolutely love. What I ended up receiving was a ring that wasn't even made to be a wedding ring. I wasn't involved in the selection of the ring at all, and has absolutely no say in the process. On top of that, I genuinely do not like the ring. It feels like he went out of the way to get me everything I didn't want. I also told him that because I did want a bit of a bigger stone I would pay for some myself, and he really ignored that request. He also hyped up the proposal a lot and in the end it felt anticlimactic. The whole year he said he was going to wait to propose around Christmas time when all the lights are up around town and everything feels magical. There is a cute little Victorian-era themed town just a half-hour away from where we live, and that is the most special place in the world to me. This town always goes all out on Christmas for decorations and theming. Now I feel I'll just be sad when we do go there, and I feel he sort of went out of his way to ruin that for me as well. That was literally my dream engagement. He said he was going to make me feel like a princess at Christmas time, and instead he just woke me up and proposed in the bedroom before work. We didn't even have time to do anything right after, as I had to quickly say yes and scramble to get to work on time. Why does it seem he did everything wrong on purpose even when we had open and honest conversations about my dream ring, proposal, etc., and he went out of his way to get all those things wrong? Should I be honest and give the ring back? I feel as though I spelled everything out numerous times. Should I talk to him about it? Update: when my boyfriend came home from work, I sat him down gently after we had both finished our dinner and explained to him that while I couldn't wait to be his wife, there were some things I would like to go over with him in regards to the ring and the proposal. He immediately jumped to the conclusion that I was a selfish gold digger and how right his mother was about me. I tell him he's being ridiculous for not allowing me to spend my own money on my engagement ring and how I wouldn't feel hurt in the least if he wanted to do the same for his own, but then he starts shooting off some bullcrap how women aren't allowed to decide what their engagement ring looks like, or when and if a man decides when he wants to marry them or how he's going to propose. At this point, I am screaming because I tell him it's effing free to drive me to the town I've dreamed of getting proposed to for ages, and it's free to look at Christmas lights and go ice skating. He tells me that my expectations are too high. I tell him to get the F out of my face for being that damn lazy and selfish. You know what this man baby does next? Well, the mother needs to enter this situation somehow, so he cries and calls her on his phone asking her to come pick him up. I tell him that he's more than welcome to go live with his mother until he's well into his 50s for all I care, but that wildebeest is not stepping foot in my house. He shouts at me that this is his house too and his mother is more than welcome to help pack his stuff. I figured if this is going to be the last time I see either of them, I'm better off just staying out of the way until they're gone for good. Well, of course mommy has to barge in and tell me how ungrateful and selfish I was towards her precious boy. I warn her gently that if she comes anywhere near me I'll rip her hair out and push her down to the floor. I've never felt that angry in all my life and didn't know I had it in me to stick up for myself like that. But then she starts screaming at me that I wouldn't dare and how she'd sue me, and I told her I claim self-defense and tell the judge that not only was she trespassing, but willingly threatening me in my personal space. She initiated the physical contact first by actually slapping my arm, and I reacted by spitting in her eye. She literally starts to shake and starts developing these pathetic crocodile tears and screams for her son to come get her. They're shouting and screaming on everyone's side and I just call the damn police. My ex immediately tells them that this is his house too, and the officer just looks at him and his mother in disbelief, shakes her head and asks, "This situation is already out of hand. I am going to have to ask you and your mother to leave for at least a day or two until everyone calms down." I am so thankful, she said, that I burst into tears myself. She gave me some very good advice that I wouldn't have thought of in the heat of the moment, and she asked me if I could have some kind of family member stay with me for the next couple days because she was concerned they would come back and threaten me again. Even better, I went to my own parents' house and our house is empty right now as far as I know, but it is getting put on the marker ASAP. Oh yeah, and for those of you wondering, I gave myself a take this piece of crap ring with you moment before my ex and his mother left for good and I threw the ring past both of their heads when they were heading to their car. The last thing I hear my ex screaming is F no. Because God forbid he loses his $200 piece of garbage ring. He actually thought he could get all his money back for that thing.
My dad is getting a restraining order on my mom 2 weeks after my disabled brother died. My parents have been fighting for over a month now. My mom was cheating on my dad with 5 different men simultaneously, and my dad found out about it. They tried to work through it, as keeping the family together was very important to them for the sake of my brother. My brother had muscular dystrophy. In the past few months, he became dependent on an oxygen concentrator that my family had borrowed from a family friend. The day before my dad's birthday, my brother asked to go to the hospital. While my brother was in the hospital, my mom came home with me one night while my dad stayed with my brother for the night. That night, she went to an aunt and uncle's house after the police were called there. Apparently, their kids were up there causing a scene. One of the kids is diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder and was threatening to unalive his mother. My mom went to check on them and comfort her sister after the kid was hauled off. While she was up there, my mom got very drunk, so after midnight, she called me to come find her and pick her up. She was out on the street by this point, wearing a slim t-shirt and just undies. She could hardly walk and she was talking crazy. I tried asking her what happened, why was she outside and where were her clothes? She told me she was too hot so she threw them away. I took her home and she tried to physically fight me to get me to drive her back to my aunt's house. I called my dad to tell him what happened. He got angry as well, even while at the hospital, and advised me to hide all of the car keys so she wouldn't try and drive. My mom called me lots of horrible things and told me I was just like my dad. In the morning, she walked down to her aunt's, which is where her car was, found her set of keys because I had legitimately no clue where they were, and came up to the hospital. She told me she was sorry, but she had a bad weekend. It happens to everyone. She then tried to blow my dad in the hospital in the direct view of everyone, including me. A couple days later, my brother was home. His first full day home, they got into it again about my mom's cheating. They both left, so I had to stay home with my brother. The next morning, I wake up and they are both in my brother's room. He is doing much worse. About 20 minutes after I got up, he passed away. I watched him say his last words. For the next week or so, my parents weren't fighting, just preparing for my brother's visitation service. Last week, my parents had occasional bouts of fighting, but nothing as bad as last night. Last night, they got home from work and maybe 5 minutes later, they were fighting again. My mom got angry and left, with a cousin coming to pick her up. She got drunk at this cousin's house, and I was supposed to come and get her, but my dad removed the fuse from the car behind mine in the driveway, so I couldn't leave. She got angrier, continued to drink, until her cousin's son drove her up here. When she got home, she was extremely angry, and my dad kicked her out. She ran around the neighborhood banging on doors, screaming 911. Eventually, the police showed up, determined nothing illegal had happened, and drove her back to her cousin's house after she packed some bags. This morning, I woke up at 5:30 a.m. to my mom banging on the door with a baseball bat and mashing the doorbell. She wanted to get her medicine that she forgot, but my dad told her to leave. She took 2 bricks that were lining a planter in my yard and smashed the windows in my living room. My dad called the police each time she smashed a window, but both times, the police said they wouldn't do anything. Eventually, my grandpa came to pick her up and take her to my grandma and grandpa's house. After that happened, my dad boarded up the windows of the house, changed the locks to the front and back door, had me take him to another house he owns so he could drop off his truck and pick up a safe. We went to the bank and he withdrew all the money in their joint account, and he went up to the courthouse to get a restraining order on her. My insane 18-year-old son tried to torture and unalive our family dog, so I beat him to a pulp. My 18-year-old son has been a nightmare to deal with since the day he was born. Even as a baby he screamed and cried more than other kids, as a toddler did not understand and why boundaries that were set upon him, bit and kicked both my wife and I constantly, smashed plates in the house. We tried our best and we really did love him, but it's hard when your kid gets expelled from kindergarten for attempting to light his classmates' hair on fire with matches which he brought into school behind our backs. At age 9 got diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. Essentially, he's a diagnosed psychopath. He got diagnosed after being expelled from a school for the 4th time. This time he snuck behind a girl and cut her undies open underneath her skirt with a pair of scissors. This was apparently the 3rd instance he has committed something so genius to this particular girl. That's what we were told anyway, we never heard it from the school before or from him. So, our son never attended school and has no education past the 2nd grade. His mother tried to homeschool him, but that tenure ended when our son slapped her for giving him homework. As of today, our son is 18 and life with him has been a nightmare. My wife and I are both so exhausted from 18 years of dealing with this, and the only 2 lights in our lives right now are each other and the family dog. We got the dog a couple odd years ago, and our son despises this dog. I've seen him play way too rough with the dog sometimes, pretend to sock the dog only to stop his fist an inch away from his face, all that kind of stuff. I've told him to cut it out more times than I can imagine, and it was over the dog that a year my son and I got into our first ever physical altercation. This was by far not the first time he has hit me, but it was the first time I responded with violence. So our dog was upstairs, he likes to sleep there. I was downstairs, my wife was out of the house, and as far as I was concerned my son was out of the house too. Well, I heard my dog yelping, then growling, then barking, as if he was being hurt or there was somebody in the house. Of course I ran to check it out, but I grabbed a knife before I did in case I had to deal with an armed intruder. When I ran upstairs, I see my son standing in the room, his hand wounded and the dog biting him over and over. I told my dog to stop immediately and told him to get out of the room, and like a good boy he did. My son screamed, "You're putting that effing dog down." He bit me, and he held up his hands to show me the wound, which wasn't even that severe. I responded telling him no, and asking him how he was even here in the first place. The window was open, but this was the 2nd story. My son can't double jump like Mario. I stole an effing ladder then climbed in here. I hate that stupid dog, I just wanted to play with him. I told him that stealing a ladder is idiocy as well as a crime, and he better bring the ladder back right away before he gets arrested like the idiot that he is. Calling him an idiot angered him, and he swung at me. He was 17 years at this point and I had not once laid a hand on him, not when he burned me or my wife, bit us, socked us, threatened to sock my wife in the belly when she was pregnant a few years ago, which caused her so much stress she miscarried. Never have I laid hands on him, but when he swung at me this time, all the years of rage came out and I swung back. My punch connected and he fell onto the bed, proceeding to cuss and yell at me. That's how our argument was solved that day. It's weird, because ever since he got hit that day, he acted a lot better for a while. Maybe he had finally realized that his actions have consequences? Yeah, sadly that was not the case. Although I do have to say that for the better part of almost a year there was a significantly less amount of anger from him, less violence. It did not stop completely. He would still get super angry during full moons. He says full moons bring out the worst in him. We also suspect he has schizophrenia. So, it was during one of these full moons that he tried to end the life of our family dog. It happened just last week, and the memory is still clear and fresh in my head. My son was out for the night, and my wife and I were sleeping in our room, and the dog was sleeping in the room next to ours. I was awoken by an ear-piercing squeal of my dog. This was a clear cry for help. My wife woke up too, and I grabbed my firearm from my bedside locker and ran into where my dog was. What do I see there? My son, holding a knife. With it, he is wounding the dog in its belly over and over, but not enough to unalive it, just enough to draw red as he's holding him down by the neck. I didn't have the strength to point my firearm at my son, so I just screamed for him to stop. My son was clearly intoxicated, his eyes shifted a lot and he seemed jittery. When I screamed for him to stop, he did not. Instead, he took out a match and lit it, then held it against the dog's tail. The dog let out a heartbreaking squeal and tried to get away, but to no avail. When I say this I couldn't take much more. My wife was standing beside me frozen, and I ran over and pistol whipped my son as hard as I could. He instantly let go of the dog and I managed to grab the match out of his hand and put it out. My son was clutching his face now, and I pistol whipped him again, and again. I told my wife to leave the room with the dog and so they did. I spent the next few minutes viciously laying into my son. All the years of abuse poured out, all the hatred I have for him amplified heavily, but the action he just attempted to commit. I kept socking him over and over, even when he was on the ground. I did not relent. By the end he was very, very wounded, but conscious. I told him that I'd give him 2 weeks to get the F out of the house or else I'll do this again to him. My manipulative fiancée keeps creating fake scenarios in her head and getting mad at me because of them. Recently she crossed the line and I broke off the engagement. My girlfriend Sarah is wonderful in many ways, but she has one terrible habit which drives me crazy. She likes to ask me dumb questions and see my answers. If she doesn't like the answer she receives from me, she gets angry or sad. She asks questions like, "Hey, what if I'm unable to have intimacy for the rest of my life and unable to have children? Will you still marry me?" I try to answer emotionally or make her happy, but she always forces me to answer rationally and expects me to be honest. But if I give her a rational answer, she gets mad or sad, saying I only love her because of her body and I only want her for intimacy. She also makes up these fake scenarios, wants me to answer rationally, but gets angry when I do so. Around a month ago she convinced me that one of her co-workers was a stalker, and that he was stalking her. I spent the whole day stressing out, taking the next day off work to collect as much information as I can about this guy and constantly worrying for her, as she insisted she goes to work. At the end of the night she told me I had passed the test, and there was never a stalker to begin with, she just wanted to see what I would do in such a scenario. Most of the time it's not scenarios like these, but rather just questions. These questions do get annoying nonetheless. I tried to talk to her, saying, "Babe please. I hate these questions. I can understand stupid ones like would you love me if I was a worm? But these questions are serious, and I can't handle these extra dramas. I really love you, but I just want to relax and spend some quality time with you after work." She did not take what I said to mind at all. Recently, she crossed a line. One of my coworkers was badly roped and hurt, and she was in the hospital for a week. The boss gave her PTO for 2 months. She and her husband both broke down emotionally. She is scared to even see a man, and her husband can't tolerate the pain she is in. I took him to a bar a few times, every time he cried because of what happened to her and how he failed to protect her. Their marriage is falling apart. Sarah knew everything about these events. So a few days ago, after I came back from work and was relaxing on the sofa, she came to me and out of nowhere brought up my coworker's story and asked me,
"Babe, will you still love me if I get roped and unable to come close to you for years? Will you still love me?"
My answer was yes, I will be there for you. But she kept pushing, asking,
"What if they made me pregnant? What if they injured my private parts?"
I was getting more and more annoyed and angry because rope is one of the biggest tragedies that can happen to a woman and she was essentially mocking it. She somehow created this scenario in her head, a very realistic depiction of it, then would not take my "I would still love you" as an answer. She kept pushing, going into detail telling me to imagine
3 grown substance addicts roping me as I scream for help and tears roll down my face. And in the aftermath I'm unable to communicate or make love.
When she said this, I said I was done. I took off my engagement ring and said I am done with you. I work 12 hours a day, but I still try to find time to do something for you. I try to buy you flowers, take you out on dates, try to buy everything you ask, cook for you often, and do everything I can to make you happy. All I asked for in return is peace and positive energy. I can't take these games anymore, and I can't apologize every time for some fake scenario you created in your head. I can't handle that extra stress. I walked out of my house, she kept screaming at me and crying loudly. I am currently staying at my mom's home. She kept calling me and texting me, I didn't answer.